Hello, my name is Cody Wallace. This is going to be my psychology presentation for cognition versus intelligence. For this presentation, we're going to be talking about the differences between cognition and intelligence, how to define them, what regions of the brain is responsible for each function, and a history of language. For cognition, cognition is the source of information and creative thinking. This could be seen as being linked to daily tasks like chores, abstract thinking, and problem solving skills. Sensations and information are received by our brains, filtered through emotions and memories, and processed to become thoughts. These processes are part of what makes the brain part of a person's identity, part of their personality. Memories or the experiences and trauma of a person can help with these processes by either implementing positive or negative concepts to a person's way of critical thinking to form opinions, worldviews, and how information is collected and organized to be remembered later. A way for the brain to do this is through concepts and prototypes. Concepts can be any kind of information, from images to ideas or memories, while prototypes are the best way to consider a default of information, similar to a template. For intelligence, intelligence has multiple classification. The categories are recognized from Robert Sternberg's theory, which identifies three types of intelligence: practical, creative, and analytical. An honorable mention, though, for another theory will be for Howard Gardner and Reich Erikson in Gardner's theory, which depicts 8 intelligences. These intelligences are linguistic, logical, musical, bodily kinesthetic, spatial, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalistic intelligence. However, these intelligences are integrated into a single classification of intelligence called emotional intelligence. Intelligence is not the key to all success, though. Some intelligences may be seen as hindrances. And as an example, someone with dyslexia does not lack intelligence, but instead is able to interpret visual inputs differently than others. A contrast of cognition and intelligence: cognition is going to be noted to be a function of the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe contains 3 separate regions, going to be the prefrontal cortex, motor cortex, and Broca's area. Out of those 3, we're only going to be talking about the prefrontal cortex. In the prefrontal cortex is responsible for decision making, planning, organizing, motivation, discipline, and emotional regulation. This shows how critical thinking and thought processes occur away from the cerebellum. For the cerebellum, this is going to be more integrated with intelligence. Intelligence, in its many forms, is seen to come from a couple sections of the brain. The parietal and frontal regions were each distinctively associated with intelligence by maintaining structural networks with the cerebellum and the temporal region, respectively. The cerebellum at the center of the network of the thinking processes shows neurons firing through other regions, like connecting to other regions where information is stored. Another way to look at this would be from the cerebellum, information is run through the cognitive frontal lobe, through the prefrontal cortex, where it forms thoughts, opinions, organizes information, and then sends them back out to become a thought. So, getting from cognition and intelligence to language. First, through cognition, process of information, all senses, memories, thoughts, behaviors, passion, or obsession are being used to create something new or in a different way that leads to new ways of obtaining knowledge and adding to our intelligence. An example of this is learning a second language, but we'll get to that in a moment. Intelligence is going to be the implementation of ideas, solutions, and obtaining knowledge. This could be used for developing upon ideas, your own ideas, other person's ideas, learning more languages, testing hypotheses to enhance what we know, what we may not know, or want to know more of. An example of this could be reading books, observing others that are more experienced, or trial and error learning until you fail to succeed. For language, language is going to be the convection of knowledge and ideas with the impression of behavior, thoughts, memories, and opinions on an experience. Words in literature could be used to educate, impress upon, or enhance a discussion. By learning another language, this opens up the possibility for obtaining new knowledge, new culture, new ways of living by other people. Now, for a history of the language, we're going to be talking about where it originated from and the kind of timeline that has jumped from when it started for specifically English to now. The first documented language was that of the ancient Egyptians. While there is no way of knowing how they spoke it, we know that it was the first recorded documentation of language through hieroglyphs. However, for the language that we're going to be talking about from here on is going to be English. English was first originated from the Anglo-Saxons. This development and spread to the United States, how we know it now, originated from the Anglo-Saxons of German and Jute combined in 410 AD. This Latin language from the Jutes mixed with the Germanic simplification of words like house, woman, loaf of bread, and Germanic roots from that. So, from the Latin language to today's modernized American language in the early 2000s, we're going to talk about those. For the Anglo-Saxons, they brought their simplified terms, as we described before, which were intertwined with that of the Latin language. Latin language, Jutes, came from more of the Roman Empire during that expansion. From there on until the late 1500s, language remained the same, aside from the Normand expansion. We'll talk about that at a different time. For 1500s, for William Shakespeare, he introduced new words and vocabulary to world to expand the utility of the language, being able to convey different thoughts, feelings, passions. As the 1600s rolled through, we were introduced to the words of science that was developed as England had more numerous amount of physicists that were creating words to describe the world around them and the world of science. Latin became too time consuming, so instead they took the language they knew, which was English, and as they discovered things, made discoveries, made specifications for things, they assigned or created words to describe those things that they came up with. From the 1600s to the 1800s, the English Empire, to what is the English and global English today of the 21st century, the language has evolved in a way where over 1 billion people on the planet are now able to use the English to communicate with others. And thank you so much for listening to this presentation. I greatly appreciate it. Again, my name is Cody Wallace. You can reach me at zcwallace@gmail.com. For my references, you can see them all here. For the Rice University, kenhub.com, nature.com for the articles written by Yong Wu, Brian Yun, and et al. For other authors that publish that as well, and the language video that we shared there on YouTube. Again, thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.